How in the world are you all doing this fine Sunday morning, this first Sunday of November? Good. It is, as always, simply wonderful to see you in church, where we have the opportunity to ask big questions and ponder our answers together in a community of hope that does its best to respect all roads that lead to the truth. I hope you enjoyed the extra hour that comes to us this time of year as daylight savings time ends. Whether you got some extra sleep, some extra time with your morning newspaper or other ritual, or some extra snuggle time with a loved one, I hope your morning has been good. I also hope you have already voted, taking advantage of early voting. But if not, I hope you will visit the polls on Tuesday. And with all my heart, I hope your candidates win. Just so long as you voted the way I did. And it just so happens that the election for the President of the United States may produce the first holder of that office who belongs to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons. It would be an historic event. Now, you may have caught the story floating around last month that I believe originated from USA Today, the newspaper published by the Gannett Company. The title of the article is "Unitarian Universalist Congregations Hold Growing Appeal Throughout the United States." It's still available if you'd like to go online and access it on the internet. The article explains our faith tradition and how a recent poll suggests the number of people who self-identify as Unitarian Universalists has almost grown 16% during the first decade of the new millennium. This, while most mainline Protestant denominations continue to lose members. But if you really want to talk about the growth of a religion, you might want to talk about the Mormons. In the middle of the 19th century, when Joseph Smith started the religion in western New York, there were 6 members. By the close of that century, there were about 300,000 Mormons. They reached 1 million members by 1947, and today there are over 14 million Mormons in the world. Among many other things, they believe their founder, Joseph Smith, was a prophet of God. Under the direction of an angel, Smith discovered some golden plates and from them transcribed another biblical book, the Book of Mormon, another testament of Jesus Christ, it is called. They believe the Garden of Eden was located in the state of Missouri, near present-day Kansas City. They believe that after the crucifixion, death, and resurrection of Jesus, he made a little trip over to the United States to teach and heal the Native Americans. They believe families will be reunited after death for all eternity, that they too can become gods and possibly even inhabit their own planet in the celestial kingdom. And there are over 14 million of them. It is the fastest growing religion in the United States. Now, I hope I don't sound like I'm making fun of Mormon beliefs. That is truly not my intent. Their theology is complex. Even with their exponential growth, their standards for membership are very high. You do not convert to Mormonism on a whim. They actively and proudly recruit for their church, consistently sending young men and women out as missionaries. And they are very clean living. They have dietary restrictions, believed given to them by God in a health code called the Word of Wisdom. The Word of Wisdom prohibits the consumption of alcohol, tea, coffee, tobacco, and other harmful addictive substances. It suggests that meat should be eaten sparingly, and that diets should be high in vegetables, fruits, and whole grains. I think a lot of people would benefit from a diet like that. Though clean living may have some perceived drawbacks. As like when an elderly Mormon man asked his doctor if he thought he'd live to be 100. The doctor asked the man, "Do you smoke or drink?" "No," the man replied, "I've never done either of those things." "Do you gamble, drive fast cars, and fool around and marry many women?" inquired the doctor. "No, I've never done any of those things either." "Well then," said the doctor, "why in the world would you want to live to be 100? While I have never met the man currently running for the office of President of the United States, I can honestly say I have never met a mean Mormon. They're some of the nicest people you'll ever want to meet. And in some ways, just a couple of ways, they're like us Unitarian Universalists in that both faith traditions believe that revelation continues. Because of this, the head of the Mormon church, called the prophet, can change doctrine as more information is assembled. They can change with the times. So when the Utah Territory was having difficulty securing statehood because of the Mormons' religious belief in plural marriage or polygamy, the prophet at the time, Wilford Woodruff, had a struggle with God, which resulted in the official termination of the practice. Statehood was then achieved soon thereafter. Now, Mormon leadership has said some awfully hateful things about African Americans in their early days. They believed being black was the curse of Cain, the mark put on the first son of Adam and Eve in the book of Genesis, where he murdered his brother Abel. Because black people were believed to be inferior, they could not be ordained into the priesthood as young 12-year-old Mormon boys are, and without which they are unable to fully participate in temple celebrations and gain access to the higher levels of heaven. This changed in 1978 when the church prophet Spencer Kimball and his 12 apostles repudiated the idea of racial discrimination of the priesthood. Mormons were disliked and discriminated against too. Joseph Smith himself was murdered, and the reason Brigham Young led them to Utah in the first place was an attempt to escape from the constant hounding the locals exhibited wherever they tried to put down roots. This, I think, only adds to their story. And Mormons have a very interesting, even compelling story. And stories are important. Now, you may have heard that on Broadway in New York City, there is a musical titled The Book of Mormon. It was written by Matt Stone and Trey Parker, who are also the duo who created and, after 16 years, continue to produce the animated sitcom South Park. If you have ever watched South Park, as someone evidently has, the story of the adventures of several young boys in Colorado, you know the show is very timely in its subject matter. But you also know how totally irreverent the show is. The language coming out of the mouths of these children, while terrible, is very reminiscent of my own upbringing. And religion is often the target of the humor in the episodes. One of the creators, I think is Trey Parker, is an avowed atheist, and I've heard he was brought up in a Unitarian Universalist congregation, though I've found nothing to confirm that. And while the shows can be tough on a variety of topics, it will often end with a very thoughtful and heartfelt soliloquy by one of the boys to conclude the episode. Now, I have accidentally seen the Book of Mormon on Broadway twice. year, it won the Tony Award for Best Musical. And after the opening in April of last year, tickets were very hard to come by. My spouse, Gail, and I were seemingly fortunate and purchased tickets for a show in September of last year, 2011, with surprising ease. But as we stood in line that rainy day to see the show, our tickets did not make the same sound as did the others when held under the scanner. We were then made aware that we purchased tickets for September of 2012 rather than 2011. Now, I know you're sad, but we were able to get tickets, single tickets, sitting in different parts of the theater for the next show on the next day. But we held on to the original tickets and saw the show a second time, seated together, just a few weeks ago. Both times were fantastically fun experiences. And if you'd like to get a fairly clean taste of the musical, just Google the words, "I Believe Mormon YouTube." You'll get a look at the most popular song to come out of the play titled, "I Believe." And it's a wonderful song. It relates to the listener how, at its foundation, the religion is based on the Mormons' ability to simply believe, to have faith in their religion. The reaction of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was pretty classy, in my opinion. They said, and I quote, "The production may attempt to entertain audiences for an evening, but the Book of Mormon, as a volume of Scripture, will change people's lives forever by bringing them closer to Christ." But just like South Park, the language in the Book of Mormon musical is tawdry, to say the least. And yet I cannot remember laughing as hard as I did, particularly the second time I saw the production. It follows two young but very different Mormons on their mission trip to Uganda. They do their best to tell the locals, people who must confront very different issues than what these young men have ever encountered. Things like AIDS, like female circumcision, like civil war. And they try to tell these people about this book that will change these poor people's lives for the better. They have very little luck. In fact, their missionary team and the team before them have not baptized a single Ugandan into the faith. Then one of the members of the team, his name is Arnold, is left to his own devices, and he begins to make up things to supplement the Book of Mormon, which is, I believe, quite humorous, given that many Christians believe the Book of Mormon is just made up and merely a supplement of the New Testament. And I'm sure many Jews believe the New Testament stuff is just made up and a supplement to the Hebrew Bible. Arnold is portrayed as sort of a nerd with an active imagination. He works into the conversations he has with these Ugandans references to Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. You'll hear about the return of the Jedi, Mordor, Boba Fett, and Ewoks. And all of these things, says Arnold, play a vital role in the beliefs of Mormons. And Arnold's new and improved story of the Book of Mormon begins to become attractive to these Ugandans. A village chief's daughter is baptized into the faith, after which follows many other conversions until the entire village has converted to the new faith. They begin to believe in a new way of life, and what they do and how they treat one another begins to change. They see everything differently, and there is now more hope for these villagers. Story. Story is very important. They will eventually begin to recruit others into this faith using what they are now calling the Book of Arnold. It's a wonderful, funny, and touching musical at times. I'm glad I accidentally purchased the wrong tickets the first time. Because in seeing the production twice, I seemed to understand the second time, more than any other time before, that the stories told by religions, by just about any religion, is an attempt to help us make sense of the world, is an attempt to help us become better human beings. But that also got me to thinking about the story of Unitarian Universalism, and I think it's pretty weak. Our story can be disjointed. It can be hard to follow. It is mostly an historical story. We often have the intellectual part down pat, but sometimes our ability to connect emotionally can be viewed as lacking. Our history, while thoroughly interesting to some, may sometimes be seen as less than inspiration. What perhaps becomes even more difficult is that your story of the importance of Unitarian Universalism may very well be different than my own. And if I were to then say that my way of being a UU is the way you should be a UU, well, that wouldn't be very UU. If you want a religion of conformity, if you want a faith tradition that hands you all of the answers to the questions of life from a series of divinely inspired books, if you want a worldview that has a leader who is infallible or continues to speak directly to God, then Unitarian Universalism may not be for you. But if you want to be part of a religious community that honors you and the difficulties that come from being human in the world today on this planet, where there is so much pain and hurt in the world, and we do our best to celebrate your search, no matter where that search leads, then you are in the right place. We offer few promises. We reserve the right to change our minds as new information is gathered. But we also want to become better human beings. I believe it's helpful to have a religious story that makes sense to you. For a while, some of you may remember this, Unitarian Universalists were encouraged to create elevator speeches that we could relate to others who asked about our faith. I think this is still a good idea. It's sort of a short story that tells others why being a UU is important to you. And I hope being a UU is important to you. When something is important, we will work hard for it, we will sacrifice for it, we will tell others about it. But creating an elevator speech may not be as important in its use of telling others about our faith. It may be more important to serve as a reminder to ourselves. Why is this faith important? What does it offer? And how does it help you become a better human being? A good story, a consistent story, a story that explains how the world works and our place in it may be the best way to create a religion that has mass appeal. But in Unitarian Universalism, we do not simply have a religion you must believe in. Instead, in Unitarian Universalism, we have a religion that believes in you. And that, my friends, can truly change your life. As we rise together in body or spirit, join in singing our closing hymn, number 348, Guide My Feet. Let's sing all four verses.